Good night. Good morning. Today is the 16th of Sivan, the 5th of June. And we finished our previous essay. We're going to start a new essay. And I am starting a new book this time. It's called Ma'amarei Admor Zaken HaKtzarim, the short essays from the Alter Rebbe. They're not really properly called essays because they're very short. So they're more like we just had in yesterday's Hayom Yom. Can you give me the Hayom Yom a second? I'll read it so that we know what we're talking about. Yesterday's Hayom Yom was about the evolution of the Alter Rebbe's teaching. And it says, in the beginning, the Alter Rebbe said very short sayings, very short words. They were very exciting to the heart, and they were called path or pathways. After that, they were called igrot. They were called epistles. V'hem arukim yoter, and these were already a little bit longer. Afterwards, he came to something that was being called Torahs, teachings. And they became the seminal part of what later became the essays in Torah or in Likutei Torah, the two big books of his essays. And after that they became even a little bit longer. Again, those were the seminals, so they were short still. And then they became called writings. So the writings are basically what we call maimarim. Okay? So the ktsarim, they're somewhere between the drachim, igrot, and the ktavim. They're somewhere between them. The pathways, the epistles, and the writings. Somewhere in between. So this was early on, and we'll see here, the one we're going to learn today is from this week's Parsha in Eretz Yisrael, Shlach. It's the only one on Parsha Shlach. And, what?
Which sefer is this?
Ma'amarei Admor Zaken HaKtzarim. Okay? And what we'll see is that this is entirely repeated, not in the same way, but entirely repeated in the Tanya. But there's some differences. And these differences are very important in understanding what he wrote in the Tanya, actually. So what I did now, and I don't know how I'll post this, but I'll post it somewhere, is as I took the Hebrew, I typed it up, because I don't have a digital, there's no digital edition of it as far as I know. And then I used ChatGPT to translate it. And then I edited the translation, but I didn't get a chance to edit it too deeply. So there might still be some mistakes here. Okay, so let's see. It starts with the last part of this week's portion. At the end of the tzitzis, when it explains the mitzvah of tzitzis, it says, Ani HaShem Elokeichem, she'hotzeti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim liot lachem le'elokim, Ani HaShem. Okay? So I am Hashem, your God. I am Havayah, your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I am Havayah, your God. So what do we see here? That there's twice a repetition, I am Havayah, your God. And in the middle, it's coming out of the land of Egypt. Okay? So he writes like this, Ki kol adam shelo meniot sheno yochal mikoch ze lidvok b'Hashem hu nefesh be'emit shenikam mitzarim. In other words, every person who has, not inclinations, but they have hindrances, they have hurdles, because of which they cannot overcome by their own strength, hurdles that they can't overcome. I don't know why by their own strength. So he didn't translate it right. I thought I edited this and somehow it's not here. Okay, anyway. And they prevent them from cleaving to God. So every person has this. Every person has different things that prevent them. That's how it is, being a human being. These preventions or hurdles are referred to as Egypt. Again, I edited this and it's gone. Oh, I see. Look at the second. It's also the same. Okay, look at the second text box. I'll read it again. For every person possesses their own inclinations, which have the power to prevent them from cleaving to God. These inclinations are the animal soul, and are referred to as Egypt. And clearly, it's clear why they're called Egypt, because they prevent you from breaking out. It is asked, how can a person leave these lands and hurdles, which are called Egypt? So coming out of Egypt was something we did historically, and now it becomes, how do I come out of Egypt myself? וכאמר, היאך יוכל כל האדם לצאת מהארצות שלו ומהמניעות שהוא מצרים. הוא על ידי שיהיה מתחילה אני השם אלוקיכם, ועל ידי זה יוכל לצאת מארץ מצרים, ואחר כך יהיה גם כן אני השם אלוקיכם. So that's the order. That the answer is from our parsha, by initially declaring, I am Havayah, your God, and through this they can depart from the land of Egypt. Afterwards, after they have freed themselves from these hurdles, they should once again say, I am Havayah, your God. Okay? What does this mean? Well, why twice? Why in the beginning and why in the end? So this goes back to something we've discussed, which is, what should a person concentrate on first? On God's greatness or on His lowliness? And this was a question that was asked by the two brothers, Rebbe Elimelech of Lizhensk and Reb Zusha, from the Maggid. And the Maggid said to them, there's two varying answers. We don't even know who asked, which one of them said which thing, though it stands to reason Zusha was the one who said, first talk about man's lowliness, because he was the one connected to man's loneliness. Not first, but he thought the main thing to concentrate on is man's loneliness. And Rebbe Elimelech, his brother, who has been exalted and a big tzaddik, so he said one should concentrate on God's greatness. That's what it stands to reason to say. In any case, they argued between them for a while. They couldn't decide which one comes first. They agreed in the end that you need to do both. You need to both think about God's greatness. God's greatness is basically your door out of here. If God is not great, then I have no horizon. I have no future. God is basically my future. Anything you think about, which is your future, that's God.
It's also your present.
No, because it could be that in my present I'm locked into these situations that I can't get out of, and so I feel that there's a lack of revelation of godliness. And so as far as I'm concerned, God is not with me in the present. Why is He not with me? Because I'm stuck in my problems. I can't get out of them. If there would be a revelation of godliness, I wouldn't feel this way. And that's what most people, what people describe as sadness, as being morose, as being depressed, all these things. Another way of describing that is saying, I don't feel God's presence. The answer is very simple. Why do you not feel God's presence? Because you feel your presence. It's either you or Him. You can't feel both. Okay? If you're experiencing yourself, so there's no room for God. If you're experiencing God, there's no room for you. So it's either or. So if you concentrate on how you feel, so automatically that discounts the fact that God's here. Because it's like you can't say that He's morose. HaShem is not, God is not morose. You are. He's not depressed, you are. So what do? So the basic piece of advice is stop thinking about yourself. The less you think about yourself, the more you allow God's presence to be, and the more you can connect to your future. And the future is how you're going to be. Every person has to have this in their mind. In the future, I'm going to be much better than I am now. I believe that the future holds good. What does that mean? It means I believe in God. Right now, I'm still the center of attention in my life. But the more that I'll work on my lowliness, which means taking up less space, in my mind, in the world, everything, then there's more room for godliness, and God is all good, so the future is all good. So his answer is, you should do it like this. You first begin by saying, I am Havayah, your God. Meaning, even in my current situation, I am Havayah, your God. This is a big novelty. It's a whole new understanding. Meaning that the fact that I feel the sadness now is also God. How? We'll see in a minute. Well, maybe not a minute, but we'll see this week. And if we actually learn more than twice, we'll finish it. Because it's short. So if I'm able to see godliness in what's happening now, and he'll explain how, then I can break out of Egypt, and then I come to I am Havayah, your God, which is like designating the future. So he says there's two stages here. The first one is to acknowledge the godliness even in the situation that I'm in. That I feel depressed now, that I feel stuck, and this is also God. So maybe that's what you meant before. That's also God.
What answer did the Maggid say?
The Maggid said that in previous generations, they first focused on their lowly state, and then focused on God's greatness. But he said in our generation, he didn't say this exactly in our generation. That's what he said. That first you focus on your lowliness, but there were a lot of sayings afterwards from both of them, from Reb Zusha and Rebbe Elimelech, that was in previous generations. And in our generation, if the person starts with lowliness, he'll break completely, and he'll never be able to come to God's greatness. He'll never believe in a future. He'll be so stuck in it. So that's what the Alter Rebbe is coming to fix. And he's coming to say that you can start with lowliness, because even the lowliness is itself godliness. And that's what he's going to explain how. Okay? רק איך זה יהיה? רק איך יהיה זהו כך? כשכתוב בזוהר, עד לא סליק בי נהור המבטשין לי. It says in the Zohar, meaning how can a person come to this? It is written in the Zohar, when the light does not ascend within it, so that's incorrect. It's not nehora, it's not the light, but the flame, right? The fire. When the fire cannot rise in the piece of wood, in the log, okay? There's a log and it's too thick.
Split it.
Then, what do you do with it? Mevatshin lei. You break it up into small pieces, you split it, you break it down. And then the fire can catch hold of the wood. Similarly, kach gufa de lo salik bei nehora de nishmata mevatshin lei. In the same way, the body that cannot hold the flame of burning for God, let's call it, here he's calling it the flame of the soul, you also need to break it down. You have to split it into smaller pieces. You have to do something with it. And that's a well-known thing. We know this in the Tanya. Where is this in the Tanya? Chapter 31. Okay? V'al pi mashal, and this is a parable, כי כל אדם יש לו ניצוץ מחלק אלוקה ממעל שהוא חושק תמיד לדבוק בו יתברך. Every person has a kindling, he has a spark that's ready to ignite him to burn in yearning for God. He wants to cleave to God. רק מחמת הגוף החומר שהוא חוצץ ואינו יכול לדבר בו יתברך. But due to the material body that obstructs, he cannot speak of HaShem, and it remains unattainable for him to cleave to God. So the body is preventing it. What's in the body? So let's see these words. It's very interesting. We'll see in a moment. But what's the word he's comparing the body to? To an etz, to a piece of wood. Why wood? Because that's what the parable is, right? Can you think of any other parable that this would work with? That you have something big and you cut it down?
What's it called? Maybe it's so too near to the candle.
No, but some other natural parable where you take something that's too thick, too big, and it doesn't work that way, and you have to cut it down into smaller and smaller pieces until it works. So basically, this is what we call reductionism. Reductionism comes and says, if you can't understand how something is working in the full picture, you have to start breaking it down into smaller pieces. For instance, I want to fix something in a car. So I can't just fix the whole car. I have to break it down in smaller pieces. So this part works, this part works, until eventually I come to the part that doesn't work. That I take out, either I replace or I fix it, whatever it is. So everything that you want to fix in the world, that's what you do. You reduce it to smaller parts. You take it apart. And when you take it apart, the light shines in it. What do you mean the light? The light of understanding. So what does this mean, the light of the soul? We just came out of learning about the intellectual soul. The intellectual soul works the same way. If I feel that I'm not connecting to the Torah, I'm not connecting to godliness, it means that I need to break it down into smaller pieces. If the light of my enlightenment, my understanding is not illuminating something, it means I need to break it down into smaller and smaller pieces. That's called reductionism. I reduce it to smaller and smaller pieces. Eventually, I'll come to pieces that I can manage. Same thing when you eat food, right? If you don't chew it down, you can't digest it.
Person can choke.
What?
Person can choke.
Right. So this is a general principle. It's not just about wood, but they chose wood. We'll see why. Maybe not today, but we'll see why. There's a very good reason to choose wood. First of all, because the Torah says that man is likened to a tree, and wood and tree in Hebrew are the same word. In English, it's two different words, but in Hebrew, it's both the material and the entity, the plant, the living plant. וכאמר דלא סליק בין ההורה דנשמת, רוצה לומר החלק אלוקי שהוא בוער בו כנר, על זה כאמר מבט שילי. It says, what is not rising in him when he's a log, when he's too big of a piece? The light of the soul. But again, this thing is true about everything that we do. If you can't figure it out, break it down. Break it down, and then each of the individual pieces can be enlightened, can be turned, can be kindled, can serve the purpose. Right. Right. We have this thing called svoga pele. You're a guy, you don't use it, but in my house we use it. What is it? It's like a sponge, but it's microfibers. It's not even fibers. It's made like a sponge, but it's a very artificial material, but it's really micro. It's like it's not on a nanoscale, but it's really microfiber-like material. And when you use it to clean, it cleans 100 times better than anything else. You've never tried it, so you don't know. You take a regular washcloth, or you take a regular, scouring pad, any of these things, and you try to clean something with it. You need a lot of elbow grease and a lot of cleaners. But you use this type of sponge, and it's unbelievable how it cleans. Like without anything, just water. Why? Because it's broken down into smaller and smaller pieces. The smaller the pieces, the better they work. It's just a rule of how nature is. So you have all of physics. You can't figure it out. So what do? You break it down into smaller pieces. The same thing with Torah. If a person feels that they don't yet understand, they don't yet feel any kind of burning, their intellect is not changing, nothing's going on, so they need to digest smaller and smaller pieces. How small? One verse at a time. One Mishnah at a time. And eventually you get a bigger picture. Eventually you get the bigger picture and you begin to understand what does Hashem want from it. This is called klal tzarich leprat, that the principle requires the details. And you have to know the details well, and then you can reconstruct the principle. So this is also true about cleaving to God. God is too big to understand. I can't understand God. So I can't burn, I can't cleave. There's nothing going on, even though my soul is wonderful, but I can't. So I have to break it down into smaller pieces. Same thing, the experience of being me is too big. I have to break it down. And I have to say, when I'm davening, I'm only davening. When I'm learning, I'm only learning. When you start mixing things together, you don't know where you are. So it's one of the big principles in Chabad has always been order. Seder. Everything has to be in its right place. Because that's how you break things down. If you break them down, then you mix them together, it also doesn't help. You have to break them down, take each piece by itself. But here, so what's the idea here? That we'll see this later on, that it's a blessing that we have physical being, that we're physical beings. On the face of it, the body is too coarse to connect to God. But it's a blessing because the body is actually built to be broken down into smaller pieces. And how do you break it down? So again, this is a metaphor. You don't really cut it up. But you break it down through controlling its different functions. That's how you break it down. So you come and you say, like we'll see, like in his time there was no issue with it, and we'll speak about it openly. You fast. And when you fast, the body breaks down things. It goes into breakdown mode. What? No, I completely don't agree. And he heard the Baal Shem Tov also. And he says here very clearly, every person should fast once a week or at least once a month. At least. Why? Because you need that in order to break down the coarseness of the body. Okay, so we'll continue tomorrow.